So again, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on disaster preparedness, business continuity, and resilience for manufacturers. Again, I'm Mike Aller, Director of Supplier Development for Florida Makes, which is the Florida Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We're very happy to have Mike Semmel with Semmel Consulting join us today. He's a subject matter expert, longstanding experience in business continuity and helping manufacturers and other businesses prepare for, respond to disasters of and emergency situations of all descriptions. So without further ado, Mike, please take it away.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you to Florida Make for inviting me to present today because it's a really important topic and you don't have to be very far from a newspaper or television to know that it's pretty timely considering all the things that we're reading about in the news and seeing on television. So the topic today is, are you ready? And specifically disaster preparedness, business continuity, and resilience for manufacturers. And the first thing I'm going to do is start out with a story. It was 13 years ago, Sunday night, May 22nd, 2011. It was about 9 p.m. I'd been outside. This time of year, the sun's out for a long time. I came in late. I turned on the television and I saw a bulletin that said that there had been a deadly tornado in Joplin, Missouri. And my heart went into my mouth. All I could think about was my friend Larry, who was co-owner of an IT company that was in Joplin, Missouri. They were in 5 locations through the Midwest. Larry was based in Joplin. You can see from this photo that we're good friends. This was 8 years later. I knew Larry through an IT industry association I was a member of, and my team beat his team in the National Basketball Championships. And the bet was that he had to serve me dinner at the annual conference wearing the t-shirt for my team. All I could think about was, how's Larry and how are the people that work with him? Because I'd just been out there about a month earlier working on their business continuity plan. I called Larry's cell phone. He answered. All he said was, Mike, we're all alive. He said, I've talked to my team. We're all alive. I said, how bad is it? He said, nobody really knows because it's dark and the whole town is shut down. This is what Joplin looked like the morning after the tornado. That's an 8-story hospital building that was literally picked up and moved off of its foundation. They found x-rays and medical records from that hospital 70 miles away. The tornado was so big that they have called it a Category 6 tornado. There are only 5 categories for tornadoes, EF1 to EF5. Why'd they call it a 6? Well, first of all, it tore the bark off trees. They'd never seen a tornado do that before. It was on the ground for 32 minutes. It was a mile wide and 13 miles long. They have never seen a tornado like this in history. So even though it was technically classified as a 5, because that's all there was, you can see the damage, and it completely wiped out that mile-long stretch and then 13 miles long. So this is what they woke up to. This was about 15 hours after the tornado hit. That morning, about the same time, my phone rang, and that's a picture of Larry's partner. His name is Arlen, and Arlen called me, and in this voice that just sounded horrible, just complete destitute, or just, he was so upset. It was like he had died or he'd watched a family member die. It was just that bad. And he said, Mike, what do we do? And I said, we've got it all in your plan. So that's a photograph of Larry sitting at his desk. This was actually a published photograph where his business continuity plan was right there. And I said, let's pull out the plan. Now, this is an IT company. And the plan was if they went down, but we knew that their clients had gone down. So Arlen said, what do we do? I said, call Dell, tell them we need 50 computers sent in. Call Lenovo, tell them we need 50 laptops. Call Hewlett Packard, tell them we need 10 servers overnighted. Call Xerox, tell them we need 10 multifunction printer copiers overnighted into Joplin. And if FedEx can't get into Joplin, tell them we'll drive to Springfield. Just tell them to get it as close as they can and we'll go get the stuff if we have to. He said, they aren't going to do that. I said, Arlen, call them and call me back. He called me back and he said, what next? So all the people that he had called had heard about the tornado. It was national news on every station, on every newspaper, on every website. They knew it was happening. When he called, they wanted to help. Now, at that point, there wasn't anything else we could do that day because they were literally looking for bodies. There were 160 people killed that day in Joplin. The next morning, when things started to open up a little bit, his team went out and found the doctor's offices that were their clients. And they had to walk through the rubble and try to figure out which wall was from the doctor's office, which roof was from the doctor's office. And you can see his people standing on these piles of cinder blocks that used to be walls. And what they were doing is they were looking for computers. And this is what they found. So within a couple of hours, they started bringing back computers that they had found under the rubble from the doctor's offices. And the medical records were on those computers. This was back in the day. They didn't have cloud-based electronic health record systems like we have today. They had their own computers and servers in those offices that had the medical records on them. And there were 160 people killed that day, lots of people injured. There was no hospital, so patients were going to hospitals outside the area which didn't have their medical records. The hospital, St. John's in Joplin, was gone. There was nothing left. The frame of the building was there. All the equipment had been blown out. All the records had been blown out, and patients had died in that hospital. This was happening about noon on Tuesday. Tornado had been 6 o'clock Sunday night. This was Tuesday, roughly noon, 42 hours after the tornado. That's the military bringing ice in because, of course, people didn't have power, didn't have refrigeration. The Red Cross was there. FEMA was showing up. The insurance companies were starting to show up. This was basically 2 days, day and a half pretty much after the tornado hit. And everybody is still staging to get settled in because they knew this was going to be a long recovery. And an hour after the Red Cross and FEMA and the military were there, FedEx showed up and started unloading servers, computers, laptops, parts and pieces to build the computers and connect them, to plug them in. And they were able to get those hard drives taken out of the computers that were damaged. Those computers were never going to work, but they got the hard drives out of them. They connected them into the new computers. They were able to transfer the data. And then the doctors were set up in office buildings and offices and any place they could beg, borrow, steal, or even in some cases work from home. And they were able to get the patient data to help the people that were showing up at these other hospitals with injuries, and people had lost their medication, their eyeglass prescriptions, you name it. And 42 hours or 44 hours later, we had the parts and pieces coming into Joplin to help get these medical offices back up and running. So when we did the debrief weeks afterwards, Arlen and Larry estimated that the business continuity plan had shaved over a week off of their recovery. We had the phone numbers. We had talked to these companies and said, hey, if we have something bad happen, here's the type of thing we're going to ask for. Who can authorize that? Well, of course, the local sales reps and the people at the lower levels couldn't do it. We had the executive cell phone numbers in the business continuity plan. So when he called those people the morning after the tornado, he was talking to the right people with authority who, in a way, were expecting his call because we had had discussions with them about different scenarios, including the tornado. Not certainly as bad as what happened. Nobody could ever have imagined that, but at least we had the plan in place. One thing they told me was that they expected the plan to protect their company and they didn't really think about it protecting other companies. And in this case, their plan helped to recover their medical clients, which ended up helping to save lives. So we shortened the time to recovery. I was sitting at my office one day. My phone rang. It was a call from an airport runway. I could hear the plane in the background. And I wasn't sure what was going on. I knew who was calling me. It was one of our clients. And he said, "Hey, Mike, we're about to get on a private plane to go to the funeral of one of our key employees who was just 30 when he was killed in an accident." And then he said, "We already have candidates to interview for his job, but out of respect, I'm not going to do that until after his funeral." What did the business continuity plan do? Well, having planned for the death of a key employee and establishing a relationship with a specialized staffing company in their industry, they had candidates and they had resumes and they had interviews they could have scheduled. And as I said, he wouldn't do it out of respect. He wanted to bury, or his employee to be buried before he interviewed for his replacement. But he told us afterwards he thought that that shaved at least 2 weeks off the replacement process. So that's the value of a business continuity plan. Our plans have helped clients survive the Joplin tornado. And that's the plan down in the lower right corner that was in the publication. And that's Larry, my friend Larry, sitting at his computer. And that plan had been done. We had finished it just about 2 weeks before the tornado, and we had planned to test it in the middle of June. Well, the tornado hit May 22nd. It tested it for us, and the plan stood up. Another one of our clients was the largest federal credit union in Long Island, New York. It's called the Bethpage Federal Credit Union. And they survived Superstorm Sandy. Now we had a lot of things in their plan. They had 30 branches, they had like 30 offices, but they had 400 people in their headquarters building. So there was a lot in their plan. But the one thing that really saved them, they told me afterwards, was that we had looked at their generator and we knew what the burn rate was on fuel. So when we worked on the plan with them, we had them sign a fuel delivery contract. So when they called the fuel company and everybody knew the hurricane was coming. That's the big difference between a hurricane and a tornado like Joplin. Tornadoes boil up in minutes, maybe an hour, if so, when the conditions are ripe, but you don't really have much warning. Hurricanes are the opposite. You see the light on that train coming for a long time before it hits you. So they called the fuel company. The fuel company came and parked an 8,000-gallon tanker of fuel next to their generator. They had fuel for their generator when nobody else did. We've also helped clients survive a lot of disasters and disruptions you never heard about, and some that you don't like thinking about. What got me interested in this was that when I was a kid, I lived in upstate New York. Hurricane Agnes came up the East Coast and stopped over upstate New York, and it flooded our town. That building is our family business. That was a retail electronics store that my dad had started, and I worked there part-time as a kid. The kid in the floppy hat looking at the flood was me when I was 15 years old. This got me interested in this. And we lost our business. But what saved us was that one of our vendors had a plan and they executed that plan, and that literally kept my family out of bankruptcy. So I knew it was possible. Why do we need a plan? Well, first of all, look at the Dilbert cartoon. And you'll see this is really what a lot of people do when they have an incident and they don't plan. But why do you plan? People cannot believe what really happens. During an incident, your brain just overloads. Your ability to perceive information is diminished. We could give you simple instructions and they literally won't connect in your head because of the stress that you're under. Your ability to make good decisions is reduced by more than 50%. Emotions. And imagine what Arlen and Larry were going through in Joplin, Missouri. It's not that big a city, where 158 people died that day. It was the day of the high school graduation. And there was a kid on his way home with his father, and he was literally sucked out of the car. These were the things that they were hearing that day. And I'm not trying to do this to scare you just for no reason. I'm telling you that when your brain is trying to process that type of information, and these were people that they knew, the emotions overcome you. It can impact your breathing, your vision, your hearing, and your comprehension. And the worst part is you don't feel it. It's how your body's reacting, but you really don't have this warning that anything's wrong. Again, during our debrief, this is what Connie Aronson, who was the president of the company that Larry was partners in, said. She said, if you have a plan, you'll have critical information when you are in shock and you're dazed by the disaster. You'll have something that was created while your mind was clear. Our employees are more confident knowing that they know what to do. She didn't say they knew what to do. That gave them the confidence. It's that they knew what to do. They didn't panic. Now, everybody panics in a disaster, but as soon as you can get past that panic, the faster you can get past it and start exercising your plan, you increase your odds of success. So you have to ask, as you're thinking about the planning process, not even when you're in it necessarily, what if you lost power, your phone system, access to your cloud services? What if you lost your production systems and your machines? Outside connections for computers and phones, critical PCs, critical staff members, your senior leadership, your building, or even just your roof, transportation routes, your supply chain, your reputation in the community, your reputation in your industry. And what if you lost customers who just can't wait for you any longer? In other words, speed does matter when it comes to a recovery. There are risks that nobody likes to think about. It's my job to think about them and come up with plans. What if this happens? Death and incapacitation, and then insider threats. Nobody likes to think about that. But these are the types of things that do happen in businesses, and you can plan for them. There are other things that can happen that have the same effect, but they're not necessarily for bad reasons. This is a fairly recent headline about a factory worker that won 310 million in Powerball during his lunch break and quit. Now what do you do? So what's your plan? How are you going to replace that person? That's the sudden loss, and that could be one of your very key employees or managers who just says, hey, I'm gone, and walks away for a good reason, not always for a bad reason. Let's look at some definitions. Business continuity. Number one is preventing business interruptions. You do what you can through redundancies and looking at your processes. We've done business continuity plans in manufacturing plants where, as we're going through the facility and they're showing us what they do and how it's being done, and we're looking at the equipment and the people, we're realizing there are single points of failure just every day in the manufacturing process. It's like, hey, I see a bunch of people going to that machine over there, but I don't see another one. Well, we only have one. And what's that machine cost? Well, one of our clients said, well, it's about $1,500. And I said, will that stop your production line if it fails? They go, yeah. I said, well, why don't we go and order another one and then we'll talk about it? Because they bill 300,000 a day and they only had one of these machines to perform that process. Nobody had thought about it. It was just a machine to them. To me, from a business continuity standpoint, remember, if I pull that out, the whole production line stops. So we needed to get another one for $1,500. That was a no-brainer. The ability to continue your critical business functions during and immediately after a disaster. Why do we say during? Sometimes disasters are like floods, where they may take days or weeks to happen before they go away. Others, like a tornado, it may be on the ground for a minute or two. So during or immediately after. What's disaster recovery? Disaster recovery and business continuity are different. Business continuity is continuing those critical processes. Disaster recovery is that long-term process to get back to where you were before the disaster. So if you have roof damage, then at some point you're going to have a new roof or maybe a new building. You're going to have all your equipment back to where it was, and you're going to be able to deliver your services the same way you did before the incident happened. The problem is, how do you stay in business in the meantime while the roof is being repaired, while the equipment's being replaced? Things like that will take time. And again, your customers aren't going to wait. There's a gap in the middle here intentionally, but I want to show you what's an incident response plan. An incident response plan, and whenever we say plan, that means written plan. It documents how you will recover machines, IT systems, and processes during or immediately after a disaster or a disruption. So it's a response plan. We're going to recover our servers. We're going to recover these machines or get them repaired. That's a response plan. Again, the disaster recovery plan documents how you're going to restore your facility, machinery, and operations to pre-disaster levels. But in the middle, you have a business continuity plan. And a business continuity plan documents your critical functions. And this takes a lot of work to build up to the point where people can identify what the critical functions are. Sometimes it's obvious. You're a manufacturing company, you need to produce products. The problem is that there are also other critical functions like payroll, HR. You may have compliance requirements, safety requirements, and things like that that need to continue, even though you're in a compromised situation. So a written plan documenting your critical functions, your recovery priorities, and alternate processes you will implement and have tested, not just words on paper, but these have been tested and proven to work to continue your critical functions while normal operations are compromised and recovery operations are underway. So as your team is responding to the incident based on your incident response plan, it has to be another team because two people can't be in the same place at once that are building critical functions elsewhere or some alternate ways of doing business so that you can continue and keep your customers, keep your employees, keep your business open while those other things are being done. So I've seen hundreds, maybe 1,000 business continuity plans. And almost all of them aren't business continuity plans. They're really incident response plans. When we open up a business continuity plan and say, well, we're going to recover the servers, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, that's an incident response. A business continuity plan says, here's what we're going to do while all that stuff's being done. Most people will buy a template, or in today's world, maybe buy a software program. So if you look at the pictures there, you'll see the template, the written template at the top, and then the screen for a business continuity program at the bottom. And then just enter things like the call lists. Who are you going to call? Who's going to be the first responders? Who's going to be told to stay home until something else is ready, and so forth. And these plans are just skeletons of what they need to be because they assume that people will just remember things and they'll know the processes, and those people will be available, and they're never kept up to date. If I find a business continuity plan that's more than 3 or 4 months old, I can guarantee there are processes and information in there that aren't current. So if something happened today and I grabbed that plan, or I went to my phone and I pulled it up on the app, it may have phone numbers for people that aren't working for us anymore. And the new people, nobody remembered to put them into the plan. The biggest problem with most business continuity plans is they make unrealistic assumptions that the power is only going to be out for a short time. I showed you the Federal Credit Union in New York. The power company swore to us they could never be down for more than 3 days under any circumstances. I built 5 days into the plan, and then we had the contract with the fuel company. They were without power for 12 days, but it could never happen. According to the power company, no more than 3. So the original plan said they'd be down for 3 days. We only built 5 days into it, but we had a process in place that helped them survive for longer than that. Everybody assumes the cell phones are going to be working, internet will be available, that computers will just be able to be recovered quickly. We'll get everything back online here. IT people, and I came out of the IT industry, we can have that back in an hour. And that's not always the case. Critical staff always available. Depends on when the incident occurs. Sometimes your critical staff can be affected by the same incident that the business is, and they're not coming to work because they want to make sure their family's safe and that their home is taken care of. And then the generator has enough fuel and won't fail. We only have one generator. Okay. Well, most businesses only have one generator, but what happens when it fails? That becomes a single point of failure. The other thing is that these plans are created by people who don't have disaster experience. And the one thing that we learned years and years ago when it came to disasters, and I spent 14 years running Red Cross disaster services in our region, was they called them disasters for a reason. There are always things that nobody could plan for or nobody could expect. When we looked at Superstorm Sandy, they called it a superstorm, not a hurricane, because it was so greater than any other hurricane. The Joplin tornado was a tornado. They called it an EF5, even though it had characteristics they had never seen at an EF5 level. So it takes a lot of experience and knowledge about disasters to do the what ifs when it comes to the planning process. They're not realistically tested. People write the information down, maybe do a little tabletop exercise, talk about a few things. Most companies don't even do that. The first time the plan's tested is when it's needed, and then it fails. And then, as I said before, it's not maintained with current information. But there is a right way to do business continuity planning. There's a structured planning process with 10 formal steps, and it's based on the Disaster Recovery Institute's professional practices. This is the international standard for business continuity planning. And you start out with project initiation, then a risk assessment, business impact analysis, which is one of the most critical things. And most organizations don't even know how to do it. They'll ask a few questions, but they really won't poke and prod hard enough to find out what the real risks and dependencies are. Then coming up with the strategies for recovery and the emergency procedures, and then writing the plan. You can see here, develop and write the plan is item number 6 out of 10. And that's where most people start. They don't go through those first 5 critical steps. And then doing some awareness and training, testing the plan, having a communications plan, and then how do you coordinate with outside agencies? The other thing about the professional practices is that there's training and certifications. So if you're in charge of business continuity planning for your organization, you can become certified in this planning process. They have training classes, they have certifications. That's where you want to be able to create a plan that works. And if you have a plan that hasn't been tested and isn't going to work, it's just words on paper. It's just saying you have a plan when it's really not a plan in the sense that it will work and you're pretty sure that it will work based on testing. Everybody knows the Jenga game where you have to take the blocks out. But what do you have to do before you take the blocks out? You got to build it. And these are all the things that go into business continuity planning. You have to deal with all the different departments and the people, the subject matter experts within those departments, within your organization. If your plan doesn't deal with all of them, you're missing something. The other thing is that sometimes things are cyclical. You may have cycles of manufacturing and delivering where you get more orders in a certain month or in a couple of months than you get at other times. We know that payroll is cyclical because people get paid every 2 weeks or every month. And there's a difference in a disaster that happens the day after payday versus one that happens the day before payday. So, what are your priorities and who's going to take the responsibility for those things? But when you look at business continuity planning, it's got to take into account people, systems, machines, raw materials, communications, utilities, computers, packaging. We have a client that we identified a single spot, a single point of failure in their packaging. They made crates to ship the machines that they make, and there was only one company that was providing them with the crates. If something happened to that company, they were going to have a backlog in their manufacturing process because they were going to have products that just sat there, couldn't be packaged, couldn't be put on a truck and shipped. And we discovered that through the business continuity planning process. And now they have alternate sources and alternate processes to make sure that doesn't happen. And finally, transportation. Last year, we were in the middle of a business continuity plan for a client, and the UPS strike was looming. And we asked them, are you ready to ship your parts and pieces? Because they have a lot of parts, replacement parts that they ship to their customers. Do you have an alternate way of doing it? They said, well, we're going to use the post office. Well, do you have a computer that has that post office stuff? Do you have the right labels? Do you have all the things that you have for UPS that if they go on strike, you can just kind of switch over easily to the postal service? They didn't. They had to stop and do that. And then the strike was averted. That was the good news. But they really weren't prepared for that strike. And these types of things happen every day. It may not be a strike. You can see a strike coming. because it's in the news. It could be some sort of failure where the service can no longer deliver for a period of time or pick up packages, and you need an alternate way to get those critical parts to your customers. When it comes to managing risks, there are really four things. We're trying to avoid them, and that eliminates the cost, mitigate them, reduce the probability or the impact of risk. That's generally what we're doing with business continuity planning. Transfer the risk, have a third party take on the responsibility. That's why people buy insurance. And finally, accept the risk. But in today's world, it's really difficult to accept certain risks because the consequences are so high. What's the business impact of something bad that could happen? So you have to define and quantify that. And you have to quantify it because at some point you're going to have to make a decision. Are you going to invest money to prevent that from happening or to shorten the period of downtime? And in some cases, it may determine how much insurance you purchase. What's the cost of lost productivity, overtime, consultants and vendor fees, delayed payments where you're not getting paid? Cash flow. And this just happened in the healthcare industry where one of the financial clearinghouses was attacked with a ransomware attack, and it stopped pharmacies, hospitals, and doctors' offices from getting paid. So even though it wasn't in the manufacturing industry, there can be interruptions to the payment system. Lost assets, lost employees, fines and penalties, and then lost reputation and customer confidence. How do you quantify these things? Well, one of a simple way to do it is, we have 100 employees. We pay them on average $20 an hour. So an 8-hour day costs us $16,000 in downtime. You know what your sales are. So we have a client who's doing $300,000 a day in manufacturing sales. Now, your loss isn't the $300,000. Your loss would be the profit on the $300,000, but it's a way to calculate it. But when we talked to them and said, hey, what if you're down for 3 or 4 days? So if you say 3 days, that's $48,000 in downtime, and then 900,000 in billing, so roughly $1 million. I said, but what if it's the wrong day? And what I mean by that is you've got orders to get out to your biggest customers and you miss the shipping deadlines. You can't deliver those shipments to them. How long will they wait for you? And their answer was, well, if we lost our top 5 customers, we'd be out of business. So it's not just a matter of doing the math. Well, 5 days at $300,000 a day is $1.5 million. If you've got to ship product to your key customers and you miss those delivery dates, they may not have the patience to stay with you. They may not be able to because of the pressures on their business. Now you're out of business because you didn't have a plan. We're going to come up with some ways that you can try to solve this. Cost of public relations to restore your reputation, cost of legal fees and lawsuit settlements where you didn't deliver things that you had said you were going to deliver, or you were in violation of your contract. And then what are the costs of doing good business continuity planning? Number one is a professional planner and then having the emergency resources in place to do this. We find some critical resources missing from a lot of plans. And you remember I said I spent 14 years doing Red Cross disaster management. Very seldom have I seen the Red Cross or the local Red Cross chapter listed in anybody's business continuity plan. My chapter, we did family assistance centers when there were incidents in the community. And one of the incidents was that there was a bottle manufacturing plant and they had a tank of molten glass break and injure a bunch of employees. And they locked down the facility. The police were there, the ambulances were there, the fire departments were there. I got called through the Red Cross and we set up a family assistance center because all the family members, came screeching into the parking lot wanting to know if their relatives were alive, were they injured, and so forth. And we were able to get a facility across the street. We had help from the police department and we set up a family assistance center. And it looked kind of like that top picture where we had Red Cross people sitting with the families. We didn't know either what was going on. But once we were able to get communications inside, we put one person inside with a phone, calling out and walking around and handing that phone to different employees, and we got their families on the calls with them, and that settled everything down. When was the last time you thought about the Red Cross helping you in your manufacturing company? That's what we did that night. And the plant manager, who was completely stressed out, as you can imagine, by the incident, was so appreciative afterwards and said he never really thought about us. We got called through a police agency, emergency food and shelter if you need it, and then first aid training. That's good just on a regular basis, but the more your team is trained in first aid, the more you can help people recover. And if you do have an incident, that you may have more people that can help as opposed to whoever shows up from an ambulance squad or a first responder team. Our friends at Florida Makes are a good example of a manufacturing extension partnership. And the MEPs are in all 50 states, and then there are regional associations. Do you have your MEP or your local business advisor listed in your business continuity plan with their cell phone number? So if something happens, you can reach out to them and they can use their network. And their network includes all the other manufacturers in the state, but also other states where they can go out and try to get you the help. And it's just one call to your MEP. So they can help you communicate your needs to other manufacturers in other states. And Florida and other state MEPs have this connects communication system, and that can be used to identify the resources, and there's no cost to use it. So in Connects, it's an online, when we were talking about this the other day, I said it's like an online dating service. You can put in your profile and all the machines that you use and the types of products that you manufacture in a profile of your organization, where you're located, contact information. You can network with over 8,000 other manufacturers. So here are the questions that you can either communicate through there or even get answered through the system. Who has the same machines that you have? Where else could you go? And maybe you have to add some tooling or something to it, but at least you could do the metal cutting, the metal bending, the assembly, whatever it is that you need because somebody else has the same machines that you have. Wouldn't it be like nice to know that? Can you work out a mutual aid plan? You can practice. So now you identify someone else that may be in the same industry to you or a similar industry where you work together with them, where you're going to be the backup to their facility. If they have a problem, they're going to be the backup to yours. You can run drills. You can go to their site and say, can we manufacture for a couple hours and just prove that we can do it? And if you have problems, now you fix those problems, you test it again, and then you have a plan that's going to work. Can you schedule temporary machine time when you can't use yours? So if you are compromised, if there's a hurricane and you have to evacuate, or if there's a tornado and there's damage, can you rent machine time at another location and have them, maybe it's one day a week, maybe they can give up 20% of their manufacturing or move it to extra hours, 4 days a week to give you access to their assembly line for the one day so you can at least stay in business. And then you may have to really triage what's important, which customers get prioritized or which products get prioritized, but at least now you have a solution. And then the next question is who has skilled staff you can rent if you need to? So your staff's not available, something happens, maybe somebody else has somebody that you can rent. And I'm using the term rent because this type of thing may be covered by insurance. And these are the discussions you want to have, but you could have someone with the skills that you need temporarily until you can replace somebody or until they come back to the community. Why do you need a business continuity plan that'll work? Well, it seems kind of obvious, but there's some more detail that you want to think about. So the first thing is avoid or shorten disruptions. And as I said before, we've gone through the planning process where we came in to do a plan, like if a disaster happened, and we found out that even their everyday processes had weaknesses, single points of failure. So by shoring those up, we were able to help our clients avoid a disruption. But then if you have one, and look at the tornado, look at the hurricanes and things like that, you can't stop those from happening. But there are ways to shorten the disruption, reduce the impact, having cross-trained staff, having a staff replacement or a temporary employee plan. So at least you know who you're going to call. And instead of you just writing their phone number down, what we did with the vendors for the company that I showed you went through the Joplin tornado, we talked to those companies. We said, hey, if we have a disaster, we're going to need somebody at an executive level to prioritize us over everything else. Who can do that? and they gave us their cell phone numbers. That's how that one phone call ended up with all that equipment being delivered into Joplin that day. Generator rental and guaranteed fuel contract. You're thinking, I have a generator. Well, what if it fails? You can have a contract with a rental company where you may pay a monthly fee to be like a subscriber, but no other costs are incurred. But if you call them and say our generator just failed, they'll deliver a generator to you. I don't know how you're going to do that in a disaster if you don't have that kind of plan, because everything gets taken by people that really don't have a plan in place, or if they do, they're taking all the available equipment and you're going to be calling around and nothing will be available. And then what good is a generator without fuel? If you don't have a fuel contract and you call the fuel company, they're going to tell you we're out. Our client had 8,000 gallons delivered before they needed it. Ready to ship inventory in remote location. So we have a manufacturing client that only has one facility. Their short-term recovery plan is that they're manufacturing products ahead of time, shipping them out to their distribution network. So if anything happens to the plant and they can't manufacture, they've got a cushion of ready-made product shippable from these remote locations. Alternate manufacturing sites, redundant supply chain vendors, raw materials, critical components, packaging, transportation, and logistics, and then trusted leadership stand-ins. It wasn't one of our clients, but I heard about a company that was owned by a young man, 36 years old, who went out on a scuba diving trip, came back onto the boat, had a heart attack, and died with a young family. It was horrible. But what happened afterwards was preventable. His business had money in the bank, but he was the only signer on the checking account. He was 36 years old. He never thought he was going to die. There was money in the checking account. They couldn't make payroll. They couldn't pay their vendors. There was money coming in, payments from customers. So the money was being increased in the checking account. They didn't have anybody else that could sign a check, and the company ended up getting sold because they lost their vendor relationships and their employees left because nobody was getting paid. People depend on your company. This is a people problem, not just a business problem. Employees and their families, your customers, your investors and lenders have literally money on the line if your business fails. Your community depends on you, and then you and your family. So when you think about this, there's nothing wrong with being selfish. It's not selfish in a bad way. It's that you want to have your company succeed because you want a job, you want the income, you want the benefits for you and your family. More and more, we're seeing business continuity planning required by customers. So the term in the industry is supply chain risk management. So you are in the supply chain of your customers. You have your own supply chain with raw materials and components and things like that, but your customers are depending on you to deliver something. Your products are part of their business and they're relying on you. So what we're seeing is business continuity planning being put into contracts where you must have a business continuity plan, and they'll put some definitions in there that must be tested annually or whatever, and it's in a contract. And that's because if you don't do it, then you're in violation of the contract. Or if you have an incident, they can come back and say, no, you were obligated to do this. You're in breach of contract. And what we've seen are customers sending out surveys to clients, but also they have certified professionals that are looking at the plans to make sure they aren't just some words on paper. Yeah, we have a plan sitting over here. In different industries, they found out during Hurricane Katrina, those plans on the shelf were worthless. And some industries, including the banking industry, not only required that planning be done a different way, they required testing, regular testing of the plans to make sure that they can function, because they found out that all those plans sitting on the shelves that people said, yeah, we have a business continuity plan, were just words on paper. If you're an owner, your business is your reputation, it's your name, it may be the family business, your legacy and your lifestyle. Your family name may be on the business. You want your business to live on for generations after you are gone. You want your business to give you the lifestyle and retirement you deserve. After all, it took you to build the business. You worked hard to get here. Don't let a weak business continuity plan ruin everything. How long will your business survive with supply chain interruptions after a catastrophic weather event, without leadership, without customers, and without a reliable business continuity plan? You can't wait. These are recent headlines. The explosive Atlantic hurricane season predicted for 2024, AccuWeather experts warn. I've seen anything from 25 to 33 named storms predicted for this hurricane season, June through October. So this is huge, and we haven't seen it yet. But what we have seen are tornadoes. This was a headline that just ran in USA Today. You're not imagining it. There have been a lot of tornadoes this spring, and here's why. This is a real problem. Kentucky candle factory destroyed by deadly tornado is closing. You may remember this from the news. They're going out of business. And then we can't stop this type of thing from happening. This is a headline about the owner of a manufacturing company killed in a plane crash. So every day you wait, any one of these things can happen, and most are preventable, or the impact can be reduced with a good business continuity plan. I'll take a minute to introduce myself. I didn't do that at the beginning. I'm Mike Semmel. That's the picture of me looking at the flood when I was 15 years old, and that ignited a passion for helping people in disasters. I'm certified in business continuity planning and cyber resilience through the Disaster Recovery Institute. I spent 14 years as an executive with Red Cross running the disaster program in our area, and that was a volunteer basis. And I'm now involved with CMMC, which are the cybersecurity requirements for defense contractors, and I've achieved the highest level, CMMC certified assessor. So I've done multiple business continuity and compliance. I've got multiple business continuity and compliance certifications, and I've helped hundreds of businesses develop reliable business continuity plans, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes even in groups with associations. What I want to do today is to give you a gift for just being here, taking the time to spend your time, your valuable time on an important topic. So I've created this disaster checklist, and what I've put in it are things where you can go in and fill in your critical information, phone numbers and things. What are your kids' phone numbers or your family members' phone numbers? We don't know anymore because we just press their name on the phone and it dials them. But everybody does have a phone number, and it's important because you may not have your phone, first of all, or your phone may have a dead battery and you need to reach out. So if you have this plan, you can just write the phone numbers down and borrow somebody else's phone and call someone, even though you don't remember their number. So this again is where you kind of slow down and you put down basic information that you're going to need when it's an emergency, and you don't have to go look for it, and you're not dependent on something like the battery in a cell phone to get to it. I've also put a buyer's guide in, and these are the actual Amazon items where if you're looking for that portable sleeping bag, if you have to stay in your car or go to a shelter or something, just click and I'll take you right there to order it. This is absolutely free. It's my gift to you. Feel free to share it. Download it, make copies, give it to your family members, give it to everybody in your company. This is good information because the first thing that you want to make sure of is that your employees are taken care of. That includes you, and the families are taken care of, because if not, they're not going to show up at work. So this is kind of a sneaky way to make sure you have a good business continuity plan. There's a QR code here and a link down at the bottom if you just want to type that in, where you can get the plan. Again, there's no cost to it. And here's our contact information. We do business continuity planning, and what's different about our plans is they're created by a certified business continuity professional. I got that certification in 2006, so it's not something brand new. And that was also based on all the years with Red Cross and dealing with disasters, and now almost 20 years of helping businesses create reliable plans. If you're a defense contractor, we do CMMC assessment preparation. And again, what's different with us is that I'm a certified assessor. I'm not someone that just talks about CMMC or just learned about it or has a low-level certification like the registered practitioners. I'm a full-blown assessor. So if we can help you there, and our contact information's on there. At this point, Mike, I'm done, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have or that anybody that's spending time with us today has.
Yes, absolutely. If folks have any questions, please don't hesitate to hop on and ask those, or you can ask those through the chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat as well. I don't see anything immediately in the chat. In the meantime, I will share a couple of other resources that we have available through Florida Makes and our network of manufacturing extension partnership parties, and then yeah, we'll share again at the end the QR code for the resource that Mike was referring to. Get there and but are there questions? See, one question from Jeffrey Rogers. Do you recommend any specific software or programs with regard to business continuity or preparation?
No, and the reason for it is there are a lot of good companies out there that do it, and there's different kinds of software. So some of the software is the plan itself, and where you can have an online portal and you can upload people's contact information and things like that. So there are many of those, and you can pick the one that you're looking, that really is the best one for you. Partly, one of the problems that we've seen is that when people are trying to maintain all the contact information for their workforce, that they're doing it with spreadsheets and lists, and the HR department is not able to keep up, if there's a lot of turnover, and then somebody switches their cell phone or whatever. And one of the missing areas really is that when people evacuate and you're trying to reach them and you have like their spouse's phone number, that is also they're together and they're in an area without any cell phone coverage. So one of the things that we suggest is to ask for an out of area contact. So that's not necessarily the person that you would go and stay with, but it might be your mother, your sister, your brother, or something where you would call them and say, "Hey, we're safe and here's where we are." And they're going to say to you, "Oh, your company's been trying to reach you." But there are programs or services where you can automate the employee contact program through these services, and they're alerting services. So this is the same type of thing you may have in your county when you get the Amber Alerts and things like that on your phone. You can get those as a company, and you can have your HR department link the payroll program to that, so that if someone is added, their contact information automatically gets added. If someone leaves your company, they're taken out of the list, but you can have automated messages in there. So if there's something like an active shooter, which nobody wants to think about, but the person that has the authority can pull up the app on their phone and press a button and send out pre-made alerts, and those alerts can be specific to your company about a facility, go to this location or shelter in place. Or if you're work in this facility, don't come to work. And then the people that receive those messages can have an app on their phone that they can press a button that acknowledges they've received it. That stops the messages from coming to them. But then if they haven't acknowledged that, the same service will start calling their phone or sending messages to other phones. We're trying to reach so and so and they're not responding. Please call this number. So these are communications tools that can really shorten the time. And in the case of something like an active shooter, it can save lives because you can tell people not to come into a facility or to shelter in place and then communicate with them to find out if they're okay. So when it comes to software, it's not just planning software, it's software that actually can take over some of the critical tasks.
No, thank you. And probably there's another question here on business impact assessment as well. And we'll have actually a little bit of information here. So within Florida Makes and the Florida Makes network, we have some resources. We've done actually a series of assessments of manufacturers and of businesses after recent storms, Irma, Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Ian, among others. And, it is a really, is that disasters in general and hurricanes in particular are really a huge problem for small manufacturers, for small businesses in general. almost half of small businesses never reopen their doors after a major disaster. And obviously we have a lot of issues, especially with larger storms. When you get to something where a situation where power is out for a week or more, that really becomes a huge issue for many companies. And so having a plan and being ready for that is something that I highly recommend you to do. We do, within Florida Makes, have a couple of different assessments. We have a disaster readiness assessment, which is an online resource. It's free. We have a couple links to that we'll share in a moment. We also have a longer business continuity assessment, which is something that our business advisors would be able to help you walk you through, which is kind of an initial evaluation, and then it would lead into a conversation with subject matter experts such as Mike around how to develop a larger business continuity plan following on from that. And that business continuity assessment does have about 10 different elements involved. As I mentioned, it is an in-person and can also, there's an online element as well. So it's sort of a hybrid assessment. But we do have a number of our team across the state who are trained in doing these. And if you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out and be happy to connect you with that resource. We also have a lot of other different resources available on our website at floridamakes.com under service offerings, disaster resources, including direct links to the online assessments, and a whole resource of preparedness and recovery resources, including a number of important phone numbers and links for you, especially if you're in Florida. But these are also available nationwide if you're in other parts of the country. Likewise, we have some information for individuals, utility, DEM, and obviously, as Mike had mentioned, the Red Cross is another important resource for all of us. We also have resources, as Mike mentioned, across all 50 states and Puerto Rico through the National Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network, of which Florida Makes is a member, but we have our resources all across all 50 states and Puerto Rico. And the link is there as to how to access those if you happen to be outside of Florida or have operations outside of Florida. And then we have some contact information for our team at Florida Makes. If you have any specific questions, you can reach out to us directly. And then again, here's the information, as Mike had referenced, on the disaster checklist and some of the information for contacting Mike. If there aren't any other questions, we are at 3 o'clock, right at the top of the hour. I really appreciate everyone's time. And thank you again. And good luck this year with hurricane season and just in general being prepared.
Hey, thank you. Bye.